This is Wednesday, March the 3rd, World History. Well, we learned yesterday that the cities had the industry, and people had to live in the cities if they wanted to work in the industry, and they had to live close to their industry, within walking distance. Well, we heard that there was going to be disease, there was going to be famine. Now, should business do anything about it? Should government force business to do something about it? Adam Smith, who was an economist in the 1700s, says no. Adam Smith says that government should keep its hands off, or what he called laissez-faire. He was backed up by Thomas Malthus. Malthus wrote that the population is going to rise faster than the food supply, and inevitably there's going to be starvation. To have the government be responsible for feeding the people, it's going to mean higher taxes and a bigger draw on the national treasury. So here's a group of people who believe that government should do nothing. Well, let's look at the other side of the coin. Robert Owen. Robert Owens was a Scotsman. He was a person who was in the textile industry. Now, Robert Owens is going to make his mark more in American politics than he is in British politics. Owens is going to come over, and Owens is going to suggest that the government should be responsible for key industries, or what he calls socialism. Now, Owens tried it in New Harmony, Indiana. It didn't work very well, but there are countries in Europe where they are highly socialistic. Now remember, socialism is where the government owns key industries, not all industries. Karl Marx was a German who did most of his writing in Britain, who believed that government should have complete ownership of all industries. Now, the way Marx saw it, there was a struggle between good and evil. The worker was the good, the evil was the bourgeoisie, the people who owned the factories. Marx suggested that in a truly industrialized country, that the worker, who he called the proletariat, will rise up and take economic and political control of their country. And they will have all of the industry under government control. Now here is a video that deals with Marx. Marx suggested that only in industrial countries could this system work. Many workers and politicians accepted his call. But as we go into the late 19th century, no country's workers are going to rise up and overthrow the factory owners. The first time that Marxist principles will be used will be in Russia, right after World War I, and Russia at the time was more of an agricultural country. Now, whether we call it socialism or we call it communism or by any other label, there's always the case when the government is going to call for the reform of the industry. Those people who believe that government should regulate business many times are called socialistic. The people who are called socialistic says, well, if the government won't regulate it, then maybe the government needs to take it over. Now, Great Britain became the first country in Europe to institute social reforms. It had areas where healthy living, it came up with business codes, it came up with building codes. When government would not or could not step in, then workers sometimes have to demand their rights. This is what we call a union. Now, a union is where everybody has the same job or the same employer. So, for example, an industrial union is where everybody works for the same industry. A trade union is where everybody has the same skill. They're a bricklayer or a plumber. Now, the only way that a union can get its demands met is if they go out on strike. A strike is where everybody quits, and the people who are on strike are betting the farm that the businesses cannot hire somebody to replace all of them. Now, unions work best in areas where the workers are skilled, and it's hard to find replacements. Now, in unskilled places like an industry, unions are going to have a difficult time. Now, the unions will not be sexist. The unions are going to represent both men and women. Women during the 19th century are going to say that they can do jobs. They should not be regulated to the home. Now, we know that during the first French Republic, during the Revolution, women were given the right to vote, but that quickly faded away. We have to wait until we get into the late 19th century, where women are going to be given the right to vote, or what is called in politics, the franchise. Now, suffrage is anybody who has the right to vote. So suffrage and franchise mean the same thing. Suffrage rallies could be found in Europe. Suffrage rallies could be found in the United States. It is not until the beginning of the 20th century that most modern countries will give women the right to vote. I think Britain was the first. Here is a video about women's right to vote. Businesses are going to grow more powerful in the 1800s. Businesses were worth a great deal of money. They had a great deal of respect. Business leaders are going to organize and promote candidates in politics. These candidates are going to be elected to office. So in a sense, the people who were elected to office are going to do the bidding of business. The Industrial Revolution cannot maintain itself without natural resources. Now, Germany had a lot of natural resources. The United States had a lot of natural resources. But by the time we get to the middle to end of the 19th century, most European nations do not. Now, they had to come up with a way to find these natural resources. Now, of course, once they have made the product, now they have to come up with customers. Think about it. You can only buy a certain product so many times. Each nation of Europe had created colonies during the Age of Discovery. This was in the 16th century. A colony was created to have its people go, settle the colony, and the hope was someday this colony would be part of the mother country. So, for example, when the 13 colonies were started for America, the goal of the 13 colonies was sooner or later to be part of Great Britain. That never worked out. That's why we rebelled. Now, what happens if we want to take the country over economically? We want to take their natural resources and bring them to our country. We want to take our finished goods and sell them to the area that we've just taken over. This is called imperialism. Now, imperialism, again, is where we take a country over. We take it over for its natural resources. We take it over because we want to sell our products to them. What we don't want to do, and this is the part that needs to be underlined, we don't want them to be part of our country. Well, we are going to look at 4 areas: India, China, Japan, and Africa. Now, these are going to be taken over by European powers. We'll also look at Latin America, which was taken over by the United States. Let's begin with India. Now, India was a country that was ruled by someone who we would probably call a king. Back then, they were called Maharajas. And these Maharajas were able to unify India until the 17th century. That's the 1600s. Now, during that time, there was constant warfare between the Indian people. Most of it had to do with faith. As a result, India was taken over by France and Great Britain. Now, during the 7 Years' War, what in America we call the French and Indian War, France is going to give India to Great Britain to rule in its place. Now, here is a map of India. What we need to do on this map is we need to take out our electronic device and we need to Google where Delhi is. We need to Google where Bombay is. We need to Google where Calcutta is. Now you'll notice I've also put down the Indian names that are being used. We need to label the Ganges River. We need to label the Indus River. We need to label where Pakistan could be found. We need to label where Bangladesh could be found. Now, I guarantee you that a couple of these are going to be on the quiz, most likely late next week. I think this would probably be a good place for us to stop so that we could take some time and label them correctly.